amazing Australians and the story of their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm delighted to say that my guest today is someone familiar to you all, the great rugby league legend Wally Lewis. Wally is widely regarded as being among the greatest players in rugby league history. Commencing his career in the 1970s, Wally was part of the inaugural State of Origin match in 1980 and was in the national Kangaroo side the following year. He played 38 matches for his beloved Maroons and a further 34 with the Kangaroos, regularly walking from the pitch with Man of the Match award. After retiring in 1992, Wally went into coaching and television. He has since been inducted into the Australian Rugby League Hall of Fame, and in 1999 he became the sixth member of the Immortals. In 2000 he was awarded the Australian Sports Medal for his contribution to Australia's international standing in the sport of rugby league. Welcome, Wally.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Or King Wally, but can I call you Wally?
Wally. I'd prefer if you were just calling me Wally. King was something that was given to me by an opponent.
Oh, really?
Actually, on the football field, a New South Wales player.
Yes.
And just to jump ahead, yes, it was one of the New South Wales players, and they asked him straight after the game. He'd been belittling me in the build-up to the game, and I'd sort of replied a couple of times.
Right.
And it all came about, and they said, well, Ray, what do you think about that? It was you versus Wally in the build-up to the game, all having a go at each other. Do you think he deserved man of the match tonight? And he said, fair dinkum, give it to him. He thinks he's the king anyway.
Oh.
And all of my friends and mates, teammates heard that, and straight after the game it was, King, can I get a drink off you, King? King, come over and sit next to me here, King. King, come on, boy, let's go out for a drink, King. And I got to hate the nickname of King, and the more that I started to blow up at my friends calling me King, the more they call me it.
Of course,
and I kind of just learnt my lesson very quickly on that trip, and I just left it alone. I didn't blow up once, but it's just gone on and on and on. So anyway.
Well, I'll stick to Wally. That's terrific. Now, Wally, when you were 6 years old, you were playing rugby league with Cannon Hill Stars, usually at lock forward. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was born into a very sporting family. My dad played footy here in Brisbane, first grade level. He played for Wests and also for Souths, where my mother's brothers were playing, the Ballinger family at Souths. And Dad was a fair footballer. My mum had some good players as her brothers.
Yes.
And it was all about being born into a sporting family. I had the thrill of being taught by my father, who was just relentless. He used to teach me every afternoon, and then I've got to say that I was relentless every time he used to come home from work.
Right.
Probably the last thing he wanted to do was spend time in the backyard. He wanted to just sit down in the lounge room, have some dinner, and I'd say, Dad, come out and teach me how to pass. Dad, come out and teach me how to tackle. Dad, come out and show me how to throw a long pass. And he never said no on one occasion, and he was a wonderful. Yeah, he was a wonderful coach.
Yeah.
And I can remember the first time when I was named to play for Australia. I looked into the grandstand, and here were my mum and dad sitting, and the old bloke was shedding quite a few tears on that occasion, and Mum said, but he won't admit it. He won't admit it.
Yes.
But he felt very rewarded for all the time that he put into those countless hours in the backyard.
And was he still alive to see you become one of the Immortals?
Yes, he was.
Yes.
Yeah, he's only passed away recently.
Oh,
and,
wonderful! Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't. He wasn't one of my greatest critics, but I found the best thing that he ever did for me was offer criticism or advice where it was needed.
Right.
And he taught me everything about perfecting your
Yes.
game is probably the right way of saying that. And when I was put into the Immortals, I can remember seeing him. He bawled his eyes out.
Oh.
And Mum said he used to do that quite regularly, and Dad, he said, "Oh no, dust. I had dust in my eye on that occasion." So
He wouldn't admit it.
no, he wouldn't. But he was wonderful, and I owe him virtually every bit of credit that's due.
Oh, I'm sure he's possibly listening from up above somewhere there. You played in junior Queensland school teams, at times representing your state against New South Wales. Did you sort of ever imagine then that you would go on to become such an integral part sort of the state of origin matches between the two states in the future?
Oh no, not at all. I was lucky enough. I played for the Queensland primary schools team.
Yes.
And of course, New South Wales were always the dominant state in the interstate clashes.
Yeah.
In 1971, that was the Queensland primary schools 6-stone team. I don't know what that converts to in kilos, but it was fantastic. We got the chance to fly to Sydney, and we played 3 what they call test matches or interstate challenges.
Yes.
And we were beaten on the bell in game 1 at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and then we played 2 other games to which we beat New South Wales.
Right.
And that was kind of unheard of at that stage, of Queensland beating New South Wales in these interstate clashes. So it was fantastic. 1971, there we were at the Sydney Cricket Ground, and thinking this could be the start of something wonderful. And it was a real thrill to be able to achieve success against New South Wales, and then go on. And I must say that I had the dream of one day wearing a Queensland jersey when I got to be an adult, and I retained those feelings, those thoughts for a long time.
How wonderful. But in 1997, you represented in rugby union. So you then, of course, went to rugby league. Yeah. So why that sort of change?
Yeah, 1977. While I was I was still at school.
Yes.
I was in my final year at Brisbane State High School. And the school that I found a little bit unusual when I went there, I can remember it was rugby union being played, and I didn't really like rugby union all that much, and I still remember being called to the principal's office, and he said, "You've chosen not to play rugby. I can guarantee you weren't invited to this school on your scholastic ability."
All right.
And I thought, well, I wasn't the best at exams at Cannon Hill State School, so he said, "So you will be playing rugby," and I had to agree to play that, and it was a great thrill for me. I learnt plenty of new thrills, new skills, the different way of playing, the different involvement I had in changing positions, and I got to be able to represent Australia. I represented Queensland originally, and then they picked an Australian side. There was no tours going on. The next year, in my final year in high school, I got the chance to be called into the Australian side again. And here we were, 17-year-old kids.
Yes.
And we were named in an Australian side that got to tour Japan, France, England, Ireland, Wales, Scotland and Holland. Wow. And we learnt just as much about life as we did about football, playing on some of the greatest rugby grounds around the world, and had the thrill of coming back as undefeated champs when we got back. And I learned just as much about life, and it was fantastic. There had to be discipline there.
Yes.
Christian brother priest, Brother Bob Wallace, was in charge of the tour.
Yes.
And he was wonderful.
Yes.
He used to advise us. He used to say to us, "I realise you're that far from being men, but you've got to also retain the common sense part of life, and respect for those that are dealing with you each and every day." And it was fantastic to have them on board.
How wonderful. But in 1978, you played rugby league with the Valleys Rugby League Club in Brisbane, and played for Queensland in their ill-fated clashes with New South Wales in the late 70s, before being chosen at lock to go into the first State of Origin game in 1980. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I'd made the decision after coming home from the schoolboys tour I thought, should I play rugby? I felt I owed it to my dad,
Yes.
and my mum because of all the time that they'd put into to me playing rugby league as a junior. That first state of origin game that I got the chance to play. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the question.
That was in 1980 that you played your first state of origin. Yes, yeah. And in 1981 you assumed the captaincy.
Yeah, it was fantastic. To be in that state of origin side in 1980 was the biggest moment of my life.
Yes.
I was playing with some of the heroes of state of origin football, of interstate football. Arthur Beetson, some of the big names that were based with Sydney clubs, because Queensland clubs just simply could not afford to keep them here. They couldn't pay them the money that they were getting in Sydney.
Yes.
So it was wonderful, and to have the chance to play in that inaugural state of origin match, I regard it as the biggest moment of my career. It was fantastic playing with Arthur Beetson, Rod Reddy, Rod Morris, Johnny Lang, all the heroes that we'd seen playing for Brisbane clubs that had gone to play in Sydney. Now I had the chance to play alongside them, and then the next year around, I found that was quite remarkable, and I got to actually captain the Queensland side.
Yes.
Arthur was... I still remember the meeting like it was yesterday. He called me into his room and I thought, I'm in strife here. I got called to the coach's room. What's he going to do? Telling me that I don't train hard enough. I'm not throwing passes to the right-hand side better than I'm throwing them to the left. What is it? And he said, mate, I'm too old, I'm too slow, I've got to pull out of this team and you're going to be the captain.
Yes. What an honour.
I went quiet, and I've got the goosebumps again.
Yeah.
And said, no, I can't be captain, Arthur. All these guys have got much more experience than me.
Yeah.
And he said, they're good players. He said, you're a good leader and you know where to go. You read the play perfectly. And I said, read the play? What's read the play?
Yeah.
And he said, you know what's going to happen.
Yes.
2 tackles in advance. You can almost predict what's going to be happening. And he said, where did you get that from? And I said, well, I've been in the backyard with my father every afternoon watching A-grade football games, teams that he was coaching. And I used to say, why did they do that, Dad? And he'd say, because of this. Why did I do that? And he said, well, now that changed a little bit, but this was the reason why.
Yes.
And I took that all in. I guess that I was born into a sporting family. My mum was a talented sportswoman herself.
Yes.
And I figured that I was very fortunate. But he said, you've got the ability to be able to read the game. He said...
and how true that was.
Don't waste that.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I won't. And he said, you're a born leader. And I said, these guys, he said, they play for Australia. He said, they're 10 years older than you. He said, they will do their jobs. He said, but they don't have that leadership about them. He said, show them the way to play the game.
And you absolutely, and what an honour, not just for you, but also, I mean, for the spectators and whatever. It was just wonderful. You played 31 matches in total, and to this day, you remain the most dominant player ever to take part in Origin football. You were, in fact, the man most responsible for Queensland's absolute domination of State of Origin in the 1980s, earning yourself the title of the King. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, it was that was something else. The King story.
Yeah.
That's.
We talked about that earlier
that's
on,
something
but
that
fascinating.
Probably almost upset me a little bit how it came about. But I had this feeling about the first time that I was named in charge of the Queensland side.
Yep.
The tag that was given me of "You're a born leader, don't waste it."
Yeah.
And I think that we had the chance to be able to do that. I can remember at the end of 1984. There were a few things that were starting to go wrong with the team, and I was questioning whether it was my own leadership that was going on, or whether I had the ability to be able to continue on. And I sat down with the guy that was in charge of the Queensland Rugby League at that stage. Was a former federal senator, Senator Ron McAuliffe.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I used to have some pretty good discussions with Ron about what we needed to do. He used to say, is there any one player you believe has been left out but shouldn't have been left out?
Yeah.
And I'd say I'll always take the view of the selectors. I said, but there's one guy. We'll have a look for him next year. He might be one of the real guys that are in charge. It was fantastic to be able to do it. At the end of the series, we had enormous celebrations going on, and I can remember going into the press conference with Senator Ron McAuliffe, and I was targeted by the media. They said, we're going to ask you the questions here. Wally, what do you think has been Queensland's most impressive moment?
Yes.
And then Ron McAuliffe would stand up and he'd answer the question.
Right.
They'd ask me another question. Ron would stand up, he'd ask the question again. And they'd say, if you don't mind, we're asking these questions to Wally, Ron. So, Wally, who do you think is most responsible for Queensland's success?
Yes.
Who was the one that's made that happen? And I said, well, it's pretty easy to come up with that. And Ron McAuliffe stood to his feet again.
Yeah.
And he said, I can answer that one.
All right.
I know. It's the Lord, Jesus Christ.
All right.
And all the journalists turned around and said, oh, the senator's been on the port again. He's had too much to drink. And being a federal senator, he knew how to react immediately. He said, is that right, smart aleck, is it?
All right.
You think I've had too much to drink?
Yeah.
And you don't think what I said was correct? And the guy sort of shook his head and he said, we have got a tan here, and I'm talking about the Lord here. We've got a team here. The fullback is Colin Scott, was born in 1959. The winger is Kerry Bowstead. He was born in 1959. Gene Miles is in the centres. He was born in 1959. Mel Meninga in the centres. He was born in 1960. Wally Lewis at 5'8" was born in 1959. Mark Murray at halfback, 59. Paul Vaughton at lock forward, 1959. Wally Fullerton-Smith and Brian Niebling were both born in 1960. They're in the second row. The front row is Greg Dowling. He was born in 1959. Greg Canescu was born in 1960. And Dave Brown was born in 1959. So I think the big bloke upstairs has been pretty good to us. Wouldn't you say that, smart aleck?
Oh.
And of course, all the journos raced out. They wanted to get it on air first or in the papers first. And I looked at Ron and smiled at him. He said, "What? And I said, "Mate, that's remarkable. That is." And he said, "What is? And I said, all the blokes being born in 1959 or 1960. He said, I've got no idea whether it's right or not, but I got rid of those silly journalists as quick as I could handle them. And I looked at him and I smiled and I thought, oh, that's it. And we had a couple of journalists hung around and they asked 2 or 3 more questions and then they said, oh, well, that'll do. And I went home and I thought, I'm going to check that out. That sounds fantastic, 59 or 60. And he was right on every one of them bar one.
Yes.
And one of those guys got the chance to be able to tease him about not getting that right. But he was a guy that was always 100% correct. And he gave us some wonderful support, Senator Ron. He was the guy that gave us an enormous self-belief. And anything that that the players or the coaches thought was absolutely imperative that they approach in a different way, we got that support from them. And I think that a lot of the times, sadly, the players get all the credit for it, but the senator, he was the one that was, very much responsible for Queensland's success.
How wonderful. And in 1981, you were a fixture in the side until 1990. You made your test debut, of course, and until 1990 when injuries forced you out of the team. Now, that must have been hard for you.
Yeah, it was. I loved it. I still remember 1981, I got picked to play against France at the Sydney Cricket Ground. Was my first game.
Yes.
Why is it a big moment? Well, I got the goosebumps telling this one again.
Yeah.
I remember the national anthem being played and both teams were standing right in front of the main grandstand. And I looked up into the stand and my mum and dad were sitting there.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's the biggest moment for me. And I could see my father. He had the handkerchief going to the eyes quite regularly. Oh. And he later said, oh, that was not. There was dust at the ground and I was just wiping my eyes. And my mum just rolled her eyes and said, oh, rubbish. He was bawling his eyes out.
Oh.
That was a big moment for me. I thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. And in 1991, you returned for your final matches.
Yeah, 1991, that was my my sort of farewell.
Yeah.
I'd been enjoying everything about footy. loved it. I didn't.
But injuries
like
had forced you out, hadn't they?
Well, yeah, I broke my arm, which cost me the 1990 tour.
Yes.
To the Kangaroo Tour, as they call it, to England and France, and I got ruled out of that despite being cleared by a doctor. And I thought, oh well, 1991 came along, and I was pretty determined to continue on. Played State of Origin, the game in 1991, in one of the tightest Origin series of all time, and I got the chance to lead Queensland once again. And was very determined to carry on. And on the day before the third State of Origin match, which was to be played here at Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane, we've been having some trouble with my daughter, my beautiful daughter Jamie Lee, and on a number of occasions, a mother and I had taken Jamie Lee to be tested, and there were some issues that were appearing to be obvious in that she wasn't hearing any of the approaches that we made.
All right.
And then we'd say something to her and she'd turn straight around, and we thought, we don't know what this is. It was tested the day before the final State of Origin game. And I can remember sort of saying, I've got to get going shortly. I've got to get going. We've got our final training sessions on. And the doc said, is there somewhere we can go, after he tested Jamie Lee? And soon as he said those words,
yes,
is there somewhere we can go? I knew it was going to be bad news. And he said, your daughter is profoundly deaf. And I remember Jackie said, what's profoundly mean? Does it mean what I think? And he said, yes, unfortunately it won't. She won't be able to hear you again.
Yeah.
And I left that test and went back to the training session. The Queensland team was training, and I said to the coach, do you mind if I'm going to be here? I don't think I'm going to be all that long. It stretched to about 3 hours, the test at the doctor's. And when I got there, I got a spray from all of the players. Oh, here he is, the Captain Lewis. He's late again. Look at this. Oh, that's a fine. You got to fine him, $100 for being this late.
Yeah.
And they were all sort of having a giggle, and I was the only one that wasn't laughing. And
how hard
I
for
walked
you.
past the coach, and they were just finishing. They were walking off the session. And I said, I've just made it here. And he said, oh, yeah, well, what about that? And I said, mate, I've just found out my daughter's profoundly deaf. And he said, oh, come on, fellas, come on, we'll keep training. And they said, we don't want to keep training. We've finished. Wally was late. We don't want to train. He said, we've got to keep training. Let's get out there. And I saw him go around the coach and talk to one player, and obviously said, oh, she just found out his daughter's deaf.
Right.
And who went to the next player, to the next, and they said, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And
Get behind you.
The ball work started again, and I think I had 2 or 3 passes come to me, and I dropped every one of them.
Oh, Wally, I'm
and
not
I said,
surprised.
that's it, we're finished.
Yes.
Let's get off. And I went back to the team hotel, and one of the medical assistants, our physio, came along, and our trainer also, Dave Ryan, came along, and he said, mate, I've got exactly the same issue in my family. And he spoke to me for a little while and said, mate, life gets better from here. There are a lot of things you'll have to deal with, but mate, you're okay. Okay. And I can remember the players sort of coming in one by one that day and that night, and the next day I kind of thought, I'm not in the right frame of mind to play this game. Eventually got it over and done with, and that was it. And I said to the manager of the Queensland team, Tosser Turner, I said, Toss, that's it, mate, I've had enough. And he said, mate, you can play on. And I said, I've got a little girl to look after now.
Right.
That's it for me. And he said, okay. Prior to the match, he said to the players, this is Wally's last game. And I can remember every one of them. I didn't hear him saying that. I was in a different area when I went out to do the coin toss. And when I got back in, I remember every player looking at me, and I thought, he's told them. Yes. And they came up to me one at a time and just said, mate, we'll win this for Jamie Lee.
Oh, wonderful.
And at the end of the game, I said, well, that's it. I've got a little girl to look after now.
Yeah.
And that was my last Origin game.
Right, right. Now, you're listening to Lots to Chat About. I'm Rosemary Peterswald, and my guest today is Rugby League immortal Wally Lewis. Now, Wally, I've got some questions. One of them, the first one, is from my beautiful granddaughter's partner, Ben, who says, you're very well known for your time at Manly and the Brisbane Broncos and the impact you had on those teams. What was your experience like a player, captain and coach during your time with the Gold Coast Seagulls, and how did it differ from your time at the Brisbane clubs?
Yeah, it was very different to the Brisbane Broncos. We had Wayne Bennett as coach there. We had 4 guys in charge of the club who were the club owners. Gary Balkland, Barry Miranda, Steve Williams, and there's just one other, I've forgotten his name, who they gave us everything that we basically, Steve Williams, and they gave us every bit of support that was necessary. We had Wayne Bennett as coach, and could not get a better coach than him. And everything professional about rugby league was included and given to us by those guys in charge. Certainly Bennett declared that everything he wanted needed to be there because he was there to not just make them better players, but make them better people, better men. And it was a real professional performance, I think, from the guys in charge. They were wonderful guidance officers, as the players used to call them.
He said for some time now there's been debate and questions raised over the pinnacle of sport being state of origin or the national game. Looking back on your career, how do you compare state of origin campaigns to representing Australia in World Cups and Ashes tours, and which games were tougher to play in, the Origin or the International?
Yeah, many times the Origin games were seen as tougher games. The international matches, Australia tended to dominate quite comfortably throughout the 80s. It was, I think, a disappointment. When I was a little or a teenager, I used to watch the test matches and just be in absolute awe how tough the games were, how difficult they were to achieve success. And then they started to win the games quite often and quite comfortably. But when you put those into comparison, I think that it's probably an insult to the international game that you say that the Origin matches were a lot tougher to play. They probably were, but you had the best 26 players in the country on the field at that time and trying to make sure that they achieved success for Queensland or New South Wales. Australia in the earlier days had become such a dominant role, a dominant team, the way that they achieved success so comfortably. It was a little bit disappointing. I even remember one of the guys pulling out of the international team because he was a little bit worried about he was going to pick up an injury and not be able to play for his club side.
Oh, right.
And I thought that's the ultimate insult. To walk away from a test jersey playing for Australia because you didn't want to miss out on playing for your club. That's ridiculous. And thankfully, that's all changed again now. The international matches and the strength of New Zealand as an international opponent guarantees that every player wants to play in those games, and they have the highest respect indeed.
How wonderful. Now, this is a question from Chris, who's our station manager here. How do you feel the bunker has influenced the game? It seems to have sort of slowed it down a bit.
Yeah, it has. It really has slowed it down a little bit. A lot of players, though, will say it's worth it because you haven't got the opportunity to whinge at the end of the game about an incorrect decision that was made. If the bunker makes it, 99.9% of the time they get it right, and you have no reason to complain at the end of the game. It may offer a slight little bit of extra rest, but they've all the players have said you're quite prepared to put up with that if it guarantees the right decision, and it certainly takes a lot of the pressure away from the referees who, at the end of many of the interstate, the state of origin games and the test matches, the referee was blamed for making an improper decision.
Absolutely. I've just come back from the Winton Film Festival, which is in the Outback, and I sat next to a lovely young man called Darcy. And Darcy was off to watch his younger brother play rugby league out in the Outback, and I can't remember exactly the town. But I said I was going to interview you, and I said, have you got any questions? And he said, yes, ask him if the games have become too docile or whatever. And I said, gosh, I just watched the State of Origin. I didn't think it was, but I'll ask him.
A lot of people, a lot of the older gents that remember how the game was in theirs days will say, it's not like it was in our time. You know, it was much tougher then. We used to get the blokes bashing the living daylights out of each other.
Yeah.
Yes, it was much tougher to play then. Yes, it was much more dangerous to play then. But rugby league now is a sport that is very promotable.
Yes.
It's reached a level, a standard that can't be ridiculed and certainly must be adored by plenty of people, and remains a real challenge for all the junior players that are playing. And ask any mum and dad of a junior footballer that's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years of age, would they prefer to play a game that's spectacular or play a game that's dangerous with lots of illegal play going on with the punching and the all-in brawls? They'd take the skillful game 7 days a week.
Exactly. Now, you have disclosed, Wally, that as a result of many concussions on the field, you now suffer with possible chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Or CT.
It's a hard word, that one.
CTE.
I must say I had to go and practice that a few times, and I got it. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Over and over and over. Yeah, CTE.
So how does that affected your life? I mean, it doesn't appear, talking to you now, at all, but how has it affected you?
Yeah, it's not something that I ever wanted to be dealing with, to be honest. I had some issues with memory. My wife Linda is the one that's got to put up with that.
Well, lucky enough, just listeners, to have Linda sitting in the studio there with Paul. So welcome, Linda.
The amount of times that I used to be in a conversation with her, and I'd see this expression on her face.
Yes.
and I'd say, "Have I already said that? Have I?" And she'd go, "Well, that doesn't matter." And I said, "How many times have I said it?" And she'd go, "Oh, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." And I'd say, "Just tell me how many times." And she'd go, "Oh."
Right. Wally's putting his fingers up 5 or 6 times.
5 or 6 times. And the embarrassment of that was pretty hard to deal with. But I've gone ahead and sought advice. Been dealing with that quite comfortably. There is an enormous number of footy players and young men and women that are having to deal with CTE. These days, it's not something that they wish that they were dealing with, but it's a pretty uncomfortable one that will affect the memory.
They're doing a bit more about it now, aren't they? If you're concussed, you don't go straight back on.
No, you don't go straight back on. You're brought from the field, and they'll certainly have the testing going on. And 9 times out of 10, that player won't play the next week. They'll make sure that things are covered in the best way possible to ensure that won't become a more regular issue.
Yes.
I was also dealing in the earlier days with epilepsy, and
I was going to come to that. Yes,
I kept that quiet for many years.
Yes.
I didn't know who to trust or what to say or how not to be embarrassed about it. And after I had it the first time, I can remember saying to a couple of my teammates, or 2 of them in particular, who I trusted, I've got a problem with epilepsy. And then I found in the weeks that followed that, there were times where I'd be at training sessions, and some of the guys would say, "Wally, are you hoping to fit into the team this week?" And I'd look at them thinking, "That's a strange thing to say."
Yes.
And then they'd sort of lay on the ground and do the
"Oh, really?"
have the seizure and say,
Right.
"Oh, it was just the ants biting me on the back."
Yes.
That's all it was. And I'd turned around and I looked at Gene one time, and I noticed that he was making his way away from me. I said, "Are you telling all the guys that?" And he said, "Oh, look, they might need to be around if you have a seizure somewhere." And I looked at him, I said, "That's a poor excuse. That is a poor excuse." And he said, "Oh, it doesn't matter. That's okay. That's fine."
But you're a great ambassador for it. I think I said to you, my son-in-law suffers from it, and he has started a wonderful thing called Positive Epilepsy Thinking, I think it's called. Now you had a very successful operation, didn't you?
Yeah.
Sadly, Simon is unable to have that. But it's amazing to me, Wally, that there's no cure at this stage, isn't it? Apart from, as you said, luckily you had the operation, didn't you?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I did. I probably thought that it was the only path that I could follow, really. To be honest and blunt, I was sick and tired of having seizures. It got to the stage where I couldn't drive a car.
Yes.
And that was something that I didn't take that news all that well. And I simply had to try and make sure that I tested the medication.
Yes.
There was Tegretol, and then Tegretol Dilantin, then Tegretol Dilantin Topamax, Tegretol Dilantin Topamax Keppra, and I got to the stage where I thought I've really had a gutful of this to sort of get to the stage I can't deal with it, and I made the decision to go ahead with surgery.
Yes.
It was the only way,
Yes.
and I'm holding up just for our listeners here
A photograph,
of me the day after I had the surgery
with
the brain surgery.
a huge it looks like a huge surgery on the side of your head, and stitch it up there. But Wally, isn't it wonderful that it was successful?
Yeah, fantastic. Again, I had the Professor Gavin Fabini as my surgeon in Melbourne. Sam Berkovic was the one that guided me to Gavin.
Yes.
And since I had that operation, I haven't had a single seizure.
That's
And that
wonderful.
was in February 2007.
Yes.
And I have not regretted one thing. And
Yes.
here they go again, the goosebumps.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. If there's a thing that I've found has been fun to do since then, it's answer the questions of people that either have epilepsy themselves or their children have epilepsy, and they're asking what they should do.
Yes.
My reply is, I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what the options are and who the doctors are you should be seeking advice from. And I think that's fantastic. And to deal with that was, was pretty comfortable. The chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It was a word that took me, or a saying, a condition that took me quite some time to get used to.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's wonderful, and I thank you very much for your support of epilepsy, because it is something out there that does need to be addressed, because a lot of people suffer from it, and we don't realise. And as in Simon's case, he certainly went on to play representative rugby and whatever, and you can live a normal life. Yeah. But that's what
I'm glad you said that. Live a normal life, and and you can feel as comfortable and not different to anyone else in the street.
Exactly.
I went around in the early days and I just felt as if I was different. I was the one out. I was the one that couldn't feel proud of what I was doing, what I was getting up to, and the places that I was going to, basically to guarantee that I wasn't going to be recognised as someone that was dealing with epilepsy. And the fantastic thing was talking to the doctors that just said, you've had to deal with something. We all have to deal with conditions throughout our life.
Yes.
It doesn't matter whether it's a disease or a cough, cold, or anything like that. We all get to be able to deal with them, and if you can do so in the best way possible, and at the end of it feel quite comfortable about it, just rest assured that you're going to enjoy the rest of your life.
Exactly. You've donated your brain for research.
Yes.
Yes. That's a terrific. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I get teased from all of my mates that I've told this. Gene Miles has told me it'll be the shortest, quickest operation in history.
Yes.
Where they just reach in and they take the brain out, which is about the size of a thumbnail.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gene. Yeah. That's great. And while that short discussion with the doctors I had about that, and they put the question to me, would I consider doing that? I said, yes, I would. I'd love to be able to do it. I've passed that on to my wife, Linda.
Yes.
And that's what's going to happen to me. I think she questions whether there's much of a brain there to get cut out pretty often as well. But if I can play any role in the furtherment or the assistance of future people that are dealing with these conditions, I'll be the happiest man laying there under the soil.
How wonderful. And it's just a wonderful thing to do. And probably more people out there should consider a similar sort of thing with various diseases. Now, Wally, many sports stars find it difficult to cope with fame, don't they? So recently I read an article, how Queensland State of Origin captain Cameron Munster turned his life around after addiction. Sadly, some are not able to do that, particularly after the fame sort of has died and they need to cope with an ordinary life. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I was probably heading the same way. I can remember a certain coach that said to me, mate, you appear to be giving yourself. When we play footy, he said, it's wonderful to star out there and to be the hero of the crowd.
Yes.
He said, but with you at the moment, there appears to be one more person giving you a pat on the back.
Yes.
And I said, who's that? And he said, yourself. You're giving yourself a pat on the back. He said, you've got a chip on your shoulder. It's about time you lost it.
Right.
And I thought, right. If you're getting that from friends, the people that you're closest to throughout your everyday life, it's best to take that. For a lot of the guys that are currently play the game, I think it's it becomes probably an incorrect way of making judgment on when they jump up and down and they celebrate. I've heard some people say, "Oh, look at that bloke! He's got a chip on his shoulder. He's jumping up and down. He's celebrating." And I said, well, celebrating when you get to be able to achieve something like that on the footy field, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. You're inspiring your teammates, you're probably inspiring yourself as well, and you're also making sure that the opposition don't enjoy that moment too much as well. So they know how to do that, and I'm sure virtually every sports person will go through that at some stage in their life, and they get to be able to take a cold look and a hard look in the mirror and realise that they might have gone a step or two too far. And it's time to lose it. And I think that's when you get to enjoy the game that you're playing at a greater level than any time else.
Yes, but it's difficult. As you say, you're up there, you're right up at the moment of fame and whatever, and then suddenly you're back to an ordinary life.
Yeah,
so it makes it harder. Yeah.
I have seen occasions.
Well, not for you, obviously, but for some players, even tennis players. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember watching golfers being involved, and when one of them put a chip in from just off the green and put his hands up and said, look at that bloke, he's got a chip on his shoulder, hasn't he? He thinks he can do that 7 days a week. And I thought, well, to me, that's not the way that it looked. It looked as though he was happy that it went in, and he was able to win the championship with a wonderful shot that very few people are able to achieve. And sometimes we get marked a little harder than the people.
The average person.
Than the average person in the street. And it's. I often say though, it's good though when we do get a little bit of a reminder that we do have, or we have created a little bit of an extra chip on the shoulders. We've got to remember we're the same as everybody else in the street. Some people are doctors, lawyers, others are footballers, and there's nothing wrong with being a footy player. You just got to be able to handle it and promote it in the best way possible.
Exactly. You might be a poet, because I had the renowned poet Rupert McCall on a few weeks ago. He wrote a wonderful poem about the Queensland team called Blood and Bone Maroon, and I'm sure he had you in mind when he wrote it. But
I've spoken to Rupert on quite a few occasions. I've had him out at functions that I've been present at where he's taken to the stage and he's had a poem about me, and I've thanked him very much for that. He's a wonderful character. He's one of the enjoyable people in lifetime. He just reminds you about the happy times in life, and I think he's he's a very special person, Rupert.
Well, we were lucky enough to have him and General Sir Peter Cosgrove in here at the same time, who's also, he was a rugby union player at Duntroon, actually, with my husband and brother were there. But Sir Peter read Rupert's wonderful poem that he wrote commemorating the Anzacs, and that was a sort of spine-tingling time as well. Now, just one last question, because we are running out of time. Your biography, Out of the Shadows, was published in 2009. Are you considering writing another memoir? I mean, or updating it? Or...
Yes, I've had one. I've had one that has gone to print, and it's out there. Steve Haddon was it. And there was basically, in this one, there was many more photographs in the book. And I've worked at Steve, alongside Steve. I've known him for 35, 40 years, and found his work to be fantastic. He's a comedian. He's a great mate. That most of this book was all about the photos and the times in my life that I've enjoyed it. Previously, I had Adrian McGregor as my author, and he. In my first book, what I loved about it was he said, "Mate, I'm just going to hit right from the start. There'll be a lot of the book which you will enjoy." He said, "There's also going to be parts that you won't enjoy because I'm going to be telling you and the stories about the people, you've become arrogant at different stages of your life."
Yeah.
Yep, it sure is. And when he said to that about the arrogance, and I said, "Yep, you're exactly right there. I've had to deal with that at different stages through my life." There's a lot of things that I've had about remaining confident when I went out to play my games of football to be successful. He said, "That's fantastic to remain confident. To remain arrogant, well, you're probably not going to come off the field with so many friends." And I found that to be a great line from him.
That's a very good true life lesson, really, isn't it? Yes. So when's that coming out, Wally?
The book's already out.
Yes.
Yes, it's...
is it? Oh,
yes,
okay. Yeah.
The Adrian McGregor one, that was 20...
Is it in audio?
25... No, it's not.
Because many of our listeners are sight impaired, but we might have to get it into the station here to read it.
The Adrian run was that was a long time ago.
Yes.
That was 80s. That was in the 80s. So that was something that probably had to be seen. I think he said to me it was almost back in the days when we had different forms of television being watched as well. So
times have moved on. Wally, sadly, we have run out of time. I could talk all day, and I'm sure our listeners would love to hear you. We'll have to get you back to come back again. But thank you very much, Wally, for being my guest today, and thank you very much to Linda for being here as well. Thank you very much to Paul, who's our producer, and I would imagine a bit of a Wally fan. Are you, Paul?
I am a bit of a Wally fan. Yes, I've really loved listening to your stories, Wally.
Thanks, Paul.
Through your interview.
Oh, thanks, mate. Thank you. It's I've got to say it's been a privilege. I'm often asked what's the best thing about playing football, and I said, well, it's probably two ways. Playing football and representing the people of Queensland makes you feel good, makes you feel proud.
Yes.
And we were ridiculed for so long about not being good enough in the interstate battles. To have the chance to be able to beat New South Wales consistently was fantastic. And to represent Australia, the best place in the world, and go on some overseas battles where we were playing against Great Britain in the UK, playing against France on their home grounds was something else, and our battles against New Zealand, which have become almost annual events where you're playing against a group of people that their relatives, their fathers, their grandfathers, great-grandfathers went to battle with to guarantee the future for our wonderful countries.
And the Anzacs,
And that's how they've become so close since that day is extremely impressive. But what they will do to achieve success and make a fool out of the other country when they play against each other, that's something else.
Exactly. Now we've got the Lions tour coming shortly.
That'll be a beauty.
I come from Ireland, Wally, and there's a lot of Irish players. There aren't that many Welsh. Normally there's a lot of Welsh, but we could talk about that. We might get you in after the tour is finished.
Well,
I know it's rugby union, but never mind. It's all football.
Well, I loved playing rugby union while I was at high school and played with a guy that I still regard as the finest footballer I've ever seen, Mark Ella.
Oh, yes.
Who's just a thrill to spend time with him. He was a wonderful player. Didn't get a lot of support in his early days. He used to say, because I'm Indigenous, I'm a black fella.
Yeah.
He said, but I came out with the line of well, I'm sure that when you've made a fool of those people that you're playing against, that criticism drifts away pretty quickly.
Exactly. But once again, Wally, thank you so much for being my guest. And I'll thank Paul, of course, Linda. But this program has been recorded in the studios of 4RPH Reading Radio in Brisbane for syndication around Australia.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.